Chapter 3. A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away. On either side, they camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they had gotten from the trolls. One morning they forded a river at a wide, shallow place, full of noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery, and when they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and dreary it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tips of snow peaks gleamed. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen a thing that looked so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we have got to get through or over or under those somehow before we can come into the Wonderland beyond. It is a deal of a way even from the other side of them to the lonely mountain in the east so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped in the dusk down that steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of the pine trees made them drowsy, so that every now and again Bilbo nodded and nearly fell off or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there were comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came to a length of open glade not far above the banks of the stream. Smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue, and just then came a burst of song like laughter in the trees. "Oh, what are you doing, and where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing. The river is flowing, tra-la-la-la-lally, here down in the valley. What are you seeking, and what are you making? The faggots are reeking, the panics are baking, tra-la-la-la-lally, the valley is jolly. Where are you going, with beards all a-wagging? No knowing what brings Mr. Baggins, and bailing and toiling down into the valley in June. Will you be staying? Will you be flying? Your ponies are straying, the daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hark to the end of the dark, to a tune." They laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think it. Not that they would care, they would only laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them as the darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them, but he was a little frightened of them too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even dissenting enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think, or get annoyed with them. For some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all at their beards. Well, said a voice, "just look, Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony, my dear, isn't it delicious?" Most astonishingly wonderful. Then off they went into another song as ridiculous as the one that I've written down in full. As last one, a tall young fellow came out from the trees and bowed to Gandalf and to Thorin. "Welcome to the valley," he said. "Thank you," said Thorin. But Gandalf was already off his horse and among the elves, talking merrily with them. "You are a little out of your way," said the elf. "That is, if you are making for the only path across the water into the house beyond. We will set you right, but you had best get on foot until you are over the bridge. Are you going to stay a bit and sing with us, or will you go straight on? Supper is preparing over there. I can smell the wood fires for the cooking." Tired as he was, Bilbo would have liked to stay a while. Elvish singing is not a thing to miss in June under the stars, not if you care for such things, although he would have liked to have had a few private words with these people that seemed to know his name and everything about him, although he had never seen them before. He thought their opinion of his adventure might be interesting. Elves know a lot and are wondrous folk for news, and know what is going on amongst the peoples of the land as quick as water flows, or even quicker. The dwarves were all for supper as soon as possible just then, and would not stay. On they all went, leading their ponies till they were brought to a good path, and so at last the They stayed long in that good house, 14 days at least, and they found it hard to leave. Bilbo would gladly have stopped there forever and ever, even supposing a wish would have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without trouble. Yet there was little to tell about their stay. The master of the house was an elf friend, one of those people whose fathers came into the strange stories before the beginning of history, the wars of the evil goblins and the elves and the first men of the north. In those days of our tales, there were still some people who had both elves and heroes of the north for ancestors, and Elrond was the master of the house. He was their chief. He was as noble and as fair in face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior, and as wise as a wizard, as venerable as a king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. He came into many tales, but his part in the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if you ever get to the end of it. His house was perfect, whether you liked food or sleep or work or storytelling or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of all of them. Evil things did not come into that valley. I wish I had time to tell you even a few of the tales, or one or two of the songs that they had heard in that house. All of them, the ponies as well, grew refreshed and strong in a few days there. Their clothes were mended, as well as their bruises, their tempers and their hopes. Their bags were filled with food and provisions, light to carry but strong to bring them over the mountain passes. Their plans were improved with the best advice, so the time came to Midsummer Eve, and they were to go on with the early sun on Midsummer morning. Elrond knew all about the ruins of every kind. That day he looked at the swords they had brought from the troll's lair, and he said, "These are not troll-made. They are old swords, very old swords of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the goblin wars. They must have come from a dragon's hoard or a goblin plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city ages ago." This Thorin, the rune's name, Orcrist, the goblin cleaver in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This Gandalf was Glamdring, foe hammer that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well. Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder, said Thorin, looking at his sword with a new interest. I could not say, said Elrond, but one may guess that your trolls had plundered other plunderers, or come on the remnants of an old robbery in some hold in the mountain. I have heard that there are still forgotten treasures of old to be found in the deserted caverns of the mines of Moria, since the dwarf and goblin war. Thorin pondered these words. I will keep this sword in honour, he said. May it soon cleave goblins once again. I wish that is likely granted soon enough in the mountains, said Elrond. But show me now your map. He took it and glazed it. He shook his head, for if he had not altogether approved of the dwarfs and their love of gold, he hated dragons and their cruel wickedness, and he grieved to remember the ruin of the town of Dale, and its merry bells, and the burned banks of the bright river running. The moon was shining in the broad silver crescent. He held up the map, and the white light shone through it. What is this, he said. There are moon letters here, beside the plain ruins which say 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast. What are moon letters, said the hobbit, full of excitement. He loved maps, and as I have told you before, he also liked ruins and letters and cunning handwriting, though when he wrote himself it was a bit thin and spidery. Moon letters. Clearly there had not been a chance before, and there would not have been another until goodness knows when. Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, read Elrond, and the setting sun with the last of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole. Durin, said Thorin. He was the father of the fathers of the eldest race of dwarfs. The Longbeards are my first ancestor. I am his heir. Then what is Durin's day? Said Elrond. The first day of the dwarfs' new year, said Thorin, is all should know, the first day of the last moon of autumn and the threshold of winter. We still call it Durin's day when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together, but this will not help us much, I fear, for it passes our skill in these days to guess when such a time will come again. That remains to be seen, said Gandalf. Is there any more writing? Not to be seen by this moon, said Elrond, and he gave the map back to Thorin, and then went down to the water to see the elves dance and sing upon the Midsummer's Eve. The next morning was a midsummer's morning, as fair and fresh as could be dreamed. Blue sky and never a cloud, and the sun